All right, I went to England, which was the first time I was ever out of South Africa, other than SADC countries like Swaziland and whatnot. That was the first time I went overseas, so to speak. And I landed in Southampton the 6th of March, 1967. I was directed to a train going to Bristol. It turned out to be the last day of steam on that line. It was amazing for me. And it was a little bit of a surprise, a slightly rainy day and pretty chilly still in March. But it was overwhelming for me because that train was traveling between 70 and 85 miles per hour, I would guess. And I had never been that speed on rail before. Our national speed limit is basically 55 miles an hour at max. So that, and to be pulled at that speed by steam for me was totally wonderful and totally overwhelming. And I mean, how lucky can a steam fan get to arrive in England on the very last day of steam going to the Western region? I think it was British Rail, but I mean, the train was to the West Country, to Bristol, and it was a few hours of bliss and really nice steaming, really nice gallop. And the only sort of difference to my eyes and ears was the speed, for one thing, and of course, all the sounds. Um, to a guy like me who's into rhythm and music, we have an accent created by the bogies under the coach, which goes ka-tun, 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 ka-tun. So it goes dunk, ka dunk. But the British train somehow didn't do that. They went ka-tun, ka-tun. I don't know why. It's a very great sound difference. But to me, the South African one swings. Ka-tun, 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 ka-tun. But getting doesn't do it for me. It's like marching next to dancing. So ours dance and theirs marched. But other than that, it was still a wonderful trip, and it was, I suppose, to a rail connoisseur, it was more comfortable on British Rail because of the wider gauge. But at the same time, it was pretty scary to me because I'd never been those speeds before. So
Do you know what model of steam train that was?
I could send you, that engine was distinguished in its general shape from all other locomotives in Britain because the metal shrouding went right up past the smoke box. The sides were completely like a panel on both sides, and all the others either had smoke deflectors just by themselves on either side of the smoke box, or they didn't have anything at all. So this one you could say was semi-streamlined in the sense that it was flattened at the sides, and the smoke deflectors enshrouded the smoke box.
Was it at that same time the first time that after that last steam train that you experienced a diesel train, and was that in England?
Yeah, I got diesel. Diesel was in England was my first time on diesel. We didn't get diesels in South Africa until the 70s.
What was
Uh,
it about the diesel train that you just didn't like as much as the steam train? Was there something in the ride? Was there something in the atmosphere? Was there just something that was missing? Can you describe what it was that you just didn't gel with on a diesel train?
there are in every way better attractive attractive engines. They don't lose power on the hills like steam does, but it's an ugly sound, and I hate the smell of diesel. So I don't mind the smell of the rather sulphurous smell of coal smoke. But diesel to me it's more like methane. It's like somebody opened a toilet door. I can't put it any better. It just didn't appeal to me. But it's an ugly sound. Diesels are two strokes. They're not four strokes. So they never really get a rhythm going. They just clatter. And I didn't like that. But they are, I mean, they are looked after properly. They're more reliable than steam. And as I say, because they're basically hybrids, the diesel is driving a generator which sends electricity to the tractive motors. They're effectively the same to drive as an electric unit, electric locomotive. It's all the torque is available. They don't slacken on hills very much. It's just ugly to look at, ugly to listen to.
I think the next experience you've got of an international train is probably in the 80s when you were traveling with the African Jazz Pioneers,
Early
early
90s.
80s.
And I can't remember, I think we went to France before we went to Japan, but it was close. It could have been either. And there, in France, I was introduced to ordinary French rail as well as TGV. And in Japan, of course, I was introduced only to bullet trains. I never went on. Japan runs on Cape Gauge for all of its commuter rails. It originally ran on Cape Gauge. And then when the Shinkansens were built, they were built on special track. And so all the intercities are Shinkansen, all the local trains are basically Cape Gauge. Having said that, I never went on a Japanese Cape Gauge train, but from all of the videos that I watched, they're a real cut above ours in terms of comfort and speed. And part of that reason is that they don't use vacuum brakes, they use air brakes. And so they can run at 130 kph instead of 90 for a start. And they're more modern and they're nice and comfortable. They ride well. They're definitely a cut above what we have here.
Can you describe the difference between the air brakes and the vacuum brakes?
Okay, vacuum brake is it's a very simple device. It defaults to on. In other words, underneath each carriage there's a big drum, and in that there's a very heavy piston, and that piston is connected by a system of levers to brake blocks which ride on the actual steel wheels. And when the vacuum is broken, in other words, air gets into the system, that plunger sinks to the bottom of the drum, and then it pulls on these levers which apply a brake lever to the wheels. But it's the pressure of the brake levers on the wheels isn't very much because it's a product only of the weight of the disc, of the cylinder. Whereas air brakes, it's the other way around. There's no vacuum involved and it's air pressure. There's a compressor in each coach, which is powered by a belt on the wheels, and the compressed air is built up, and there's a reserve tank of compressed air. And when the brakes are applied, they are applied with a lot more force, the brake blocks. And of course, it's not only that, but they tend to put disc brakes on the wheels of trains that are controlled by air brakes as well, not brake blocks. And so they don't squeal as much. They're much more effective. Train stops quicker. If train stops quicker, it means that it can go faster. So it's a whole different world. But vacuum brakes are very simple. As long as there's not a leak in the system, all of those brake blocks can be sucked off all the wheels of the train. But if any amount of air is introduced, then all of the brake blocks on the whole train go on the wheel. So it's quite effective. and of course it's not high tech. It's very low tech, very easy to repair, and not very reliable. If you leave a train parked with vacuum brakes with the blocks on the wheels, it, it's quite likely to loosen itself and go careering down a hill, which has often happened. Rovos lost a few coaches recently because they didn't. There's a handbrake in each coach, which you're supposed to lock if you want to leave it on. If it's on a gradient, vacuum brakes are not reliable. But air brakes, the weakness of air brakes is that I don't quite know how they default to on. There is a device that defaults them to on, but I don't know how that works. So, because I mean, air is pushing those those clamps onto the disc. So, what makes them come off? I don't know. I don't know how they work. To be honest with you, all I know is they work very, very well, and they stop trains much quicker than vacuum does. And so, there's vacuum brakes. So, I only encountered here in South Africa. They're not. They weren't even used in Australia, which is quite backward in the rail. So, that's an altogether different technological level of achievement. Once you've got air brakes, you've got a very different level of performance. About, say, 25 to 30% higher speed and higher stopping power. Changes everything.
So, can you describe the difference being in France of the passenger train and then the TGV, and just kind of paint a picture of the commuter train back in the early 90s, what you experienced, how it was different from South African trains, and then we'll go on to the TGV and just, that experience, how you felt, the first impressions, and that sort of thing.
Okay, but I mean, the very first train that I went on in France was a TGV, but the second or third one that I went on was an ordinary non-TGV sleeper train. And, that was interesting. The norm in South Africa is sleeper trains for mainline. And the norm overseas is sitters for mainline. But this was a sleeper train. We went from Toulon to Paris on a sleeper train. And it was an all-night trip. And the immediate difference between it in South Africa was just how fast it was. It was not slower than 70 miles an hour, I'd say 130 kph. Probably faster, but certainly not slower than 130 kph. It was the rail. It was an older line, and it wasn't welded line, so there was a lot of clickety clacks. Welded line, you get seldom a clickety clack every kilometer or so. But on the older lines that don't have welded rails, you get with the old style. So that was very familiar in a sense. And once again, the rhythm set up by the bogies on the French train is completely different from the British train and completely different from a South African train. It's a different rhythmic, a different, what can I call it, different percussive experience altogether, very markedly so. But I can't remember well enough what the difference was. It was just different. And then the other thing about the sleeper train was that the huge surprise was that it was unisex. I was in the upper bunk, and there was a woman on the corresponding upper bunk on the other side of the compartment. And she was French and very used to it. I wasn't used to that at all. So it was novel from my point of view, having a woman sleeping in the same compartment. So I would never have come across that in South Africa. Not in that sort of situation. I mean, I might hire a coupe with a wife in South Africa. That's different. But having a stranger woman in a compartment was novel to me and to the guys in the band. Very different. But it's a very efficiently run train as well. Not at all like South African railways. It put panic amongst our guys because much as I tried to warn them that this train was going to arrive and stop for only 2 minutes, they had never been on a French train before. And I said to them, you've got to be ready to board. Load the instruments, load your baggage, and we're going to go. And what exactly happened? This train came roaring in at a hell of a speed, braked very fast. And then they all sauntered to the other side of the platform, lit up their smokes to have a chat. And then, panic station set in. The conductor came and started yelling at them at French, and it was misunderstood. And they told him he was a racist, and it was a whole number. And then I said to them, I told you guys, you got 2 minutes. So, of course, when we piled everything onto the train and we left, and then everybody came with big smiles and said to me, oh, we get it now. I tried to tell you. But that's us. We learn by doing. We don't learn by being told or reading books or anything. We learn by doing. So that was like a new experience for the guys. The other thing was, of course, that train wasn't late. And everybody in the band, when they got off the train on time in Paris, they kind of looked as if they were cheated or something was wrong because we had arrived on time. And one of the guys even said, this is no good. You can't tell your girlfriend on the phone that the train's late anymore, which used to cover a multitude of sins apparently in South Africa. So yeah, it was efficiently run. It was fast. It was a bit noisy. The ride wasn't bad apart from the noise of the clickety clacks. In some other, just by way of explanation, there was no lurching or rolling, no pitching, lurching or rolling, which there was on some other railway lines that I've experienced. Not South Africa. South Africa's got really nice track, or had very nice track at that time, still in the 90s. The French track was pretty competent. Not it was a branch line ish, an old main line, so it had tighter radius curves than the TGV by far. You would have noticed the meniscus on your drink banking up on curve if I'd had such a thing, but I didn't have a drink on that train because it was overnight. But and it was nicely heated. Most of South African Railways trains are not were never competently heated. Okay, the system in South Africa was that we had steam heaters, which I think was true of the French train as well, but I'm not sure. So whenever I went on a South African train, all my life, the heaters seldom worked. And once I became a fireman, one way or another, I learned that the way they worked was that steam was tapped from the steam engine through a special series, right down the train, through a series of steam pipes connected coach to coach. And the reason why the heater never worked is because it's a property of steam radiators that when the train stops, the water condenses and those pipes fill up. And for the heating system to work in a train, that system has to be bled. And the way to do that is to go to the back of a train and there's a bung there and you knock it off with a nice stout piece of wood or something. It's basically like a metal cap that fits onto a pipe, screws on with one or two screws. You unscrew it and it's on a chain so it doesn't get lost. And knock the thing off, and then a 22 or 23 or 24 feet, say 7 or 8 meters jet of water squirts out along the track. And that's all the water that has now condensed into the system. When that gets ejected and steam starts coming out, then you could put the bung back, screw it back on, and there's a clip there to make sure that it doesn't unscrew. And now all the heaters work. And that made me realize that all my life, the train running staff on the train were just too lazy to do that. I bled one of those systems in my life. And it's a doddle, all you got to do, as I say, it's a bit of a thump to knock the bung off. And you do get your hands dirty. But that's it. But nobody was going to take a walk to the end of a train. I mean, this was under the nets. This is not a racial thing. Just nobody wants to do that. And the first person that did it, when I got into Park Station once on a train trip, this was also probably towards the year 2000. The train manager came and saw sorted out my ticket, and I said, the heat is not working. And then he said to me, uh, uh, I, there's nothing much I can do about that. So I said, you're going to have to do better than that. I'm a footplate man. You have to do better than that. Will you please go to the end of the train and bleed the system? And he said, it's not my job. So I said, okay, well, you won't have a job very soon because I'm going to complain about this. And, okay. And he went and he did it, and we had lovely heat. It was, Charlie was at my kind of university around about the year 2000. So it was about then sometime. And that is the only time that I've ever known anybody to actually do that job. And he was right. It wasn't his job. The train should arrive with it bled, but nobody ever did it. Years, I mean, I'm talking probably 50 years of my life. I almost never had heaters on a train, because nobody would do their job. So that's like par for the course in South Africa. So the French train was very efficiently heated, and I didn't have the time to check whether they have a steam tender to produce steam, because we were not pulled by steam. So there must have been a system producing steam, or else it was some other, maybe a hybrid of a steam generator in each coach producing steam, or maybe it wasn't steam. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. Maybe it was an electric element or something. I don't know. But it was very nicely heated. If anything, I was hot overnight in that train. Too hot.
Is there anything else about the French train that maybe the decor, maybe the food carts, anything that was served, anything that was just very different, a departure from the South African ones before we move on to the
Yeah.
TGV?
Okay, that's a good question, because on South African trains, the one nice thing is you've always got a guy with a trolley who's selling sweets and potato crisps and coffee, tea, cokes, and even liquor, depending on the time of day. That train had nothing. You couldn't get anything on that overnight train. So the difference, of course, with those trains is generally their journeys are complete in less than 10 hours. So you can wait. But I mean, 26 hours to Cape Town, if you can't get food and drink on a train, especially in the colder winter or in the heat of summer, you'd feel very sorry for yourself indeed. But there was none of those creature comforts on that French train. You got on, you slept, and you got off, that kind of thing. There was no trolleys. There was a bedding attendant. And I would say this, there were nice ladders to the top bunk, which we never had. Well, we did in the 50s in South Africa. There were ladders available for the top bunk, but they disappeared sometime in the 50s. We never saw them again. So, like, everything was competent. About anything else, I never saw any allowance for disabled people on the French train, which the TGVs have. The modern trains all have baby changing, wheelchair access. That wasn't present on the French train. So it was probably the same generation as our kind of trains here, really, but very well done. The livery of the train was a dark bottle green. It was pretty handsome, and it fitted in nicely with. We were going mostly through forests, and it looked pretty. It was very shiny and smart, very well maintained. No dirt.
Contrast that with your experience of the TGV and how that was just a departure from, you know, everything that you had been on before. What kind of an experience was that?
Well, a TGV is like you're sitting in an Airbus or a jumbo jet, only it's on rails. that everything is like an aircraft. The seating is like an aircraft. But of course, it's much quieter. A TGV is incredibly quiet. It's well, when I was going to Angoulême in the TGV, I had enough French understanding at the time to listen to the patter that was coming across the public address. And at one stage, they announced that we were doing 362 kilometers per hour, which is the maximum speed that we would achieve anywhere on that trip. And I had a glass of water on my table, and my fellow passenger had a glass of wine. And all you saw was the meniscus tilting. But it was eerily quiet. We could converse, and just like I'm talking now, could converse normally. There was no wind noise, very little track noise. The public address announcements were done in a calm voice. They weren't overly loud. And then there was a digital readout of our speed, and there was a graphic, another LCD graphic of our route. That's all just so much of an advancement on South African railways. I mean, our commuter trains are catching up on that, but we'll come to that another time. But that's with the immediate impression was that it was just basically an aeroplane in every sense of the word. The accommodation, the seating, the visible environment was more like the fuselage than a coach. And
Are they pressurized going at that speed?
no, the temperature control, yes, but there's no, not that I know of. There's no. It's not higher than an atmosphere. But this insulation is incredible. And then, of course, in the TGV, um, you get a very timely advance warning as to what the next station is and when you will arrive there, because you get, once again, you get 2 minutes. That's it. If you aren't off the train, you get three angry Frenchmen bawling at you. Time is of the essence, clearly. But and then, of course, the if you want refreshments on it at that stage, I don't know if it's changed now, but at that stage, if you wanted refreshments on a TGV, you had to go and fetch them from a buffet car, and there wasn't any. Some of the TGVs have tables, but there wasn't any service in the coaches. You had to go and get your stuff. So we're very spoiled in South Africa that way, because people bring things to you, but they can't. Slow train, not breakneck speeds around corners or anything like that. But I mean, the whole thing about the TGV too is it's incredibly clean, incredibly competent. There were electric plugs everywhere. Also, I mean, it's before USB times, but there were you could run a laptop, even though there was not. We were not talking Wi-Fi. I mean, this early '90s, Wi-Fi was barely a thing in those days on trains, anyway. But yeah, there were plugs for hair dryers and all those. I mean, even South Africa Railways eventually had plugs for hair dryers and razors. But as I say, the TGV was just way, way above. I mean, TGVs are competing with air travel. You can, it's not really any easier to fly from Paris to Bordeaux. The flight takes an hour. If there's a 45-minute mess on the front of the flight, and there's a half-hour mess at the end, so you're talking 2.25 hours against 3.5 hours. And the nice thing about the TGV is that you go to a station in Paris. You don't have to go outside Paris to an airport terminal. So that journey is out. It's a short journey to the station as opposed to a long journey to an airport, and the same on the other end. So a lot of people take the TGV regionally around, from Paris to Switzerland, and now, of course, the Channel and to Italy, and they don't fly for a 500-kilometer trip. Trains are much preferred by a lot of people.
So now, if you don't mind, just doing a comparison between the TGV and the bullet train in Japan. You know, the similarities, the
Yeah,
experience, and just really paint a picture of seeing that bullet train, because I'm betting
yeah.
that must have been quite exciting.
It's very exciting. The bullet train has one thing over the TGV that I noticed. Otherwise, they're inside a bullet train and inside a TGV is almost exactly the same experience. Um, but in motion at 320 kilometers per hour, one TGV train oncoming, passing the one that you're in, produces a kind of a sonic boom, boom, as the train comes past. But a bullet train doesn't. A bullet train passing another bullet train doesn't do that. So the Japanese have got something right that the French hadn't got right yet. I don't know what it is, but there was none of that impact of another train passing you like there was in the TGVs. Otherwise, the experience was almost identical. And the timekeeping, absolute. Whether it's a TGV or a bullet train, if it's meant to leave at 1 minute past 9, you look out, there's a digital clock and it says 0900. And then as the zeros change into the 01, the train starts creeping off. That's either a TGV or a bullet train. You can set your watch to that. And they're very seldom late. I I was never late on a TGV or a bullet train. I was early on a TGV. I was 2 minutes early on a TGV. Not a bullet train. If you leave on time, you arrive exactly on time. I don't know how they do it. But I do know that it's completely software controlled. You know, driver is this just there for problems. But yeah, I mean, they're just incredible experiences. Watching the countryside, the most noticeable thing if you come from South Africa is passing traffic on a highway. Sometimes the train flanks a highway, and cars look like they're standing still. They look like they're just taking off. They look like they're just pulling off. They're so slow. But I mean, they're allowed to do 120 kilometers per hour, and you're doing 320. So no wonder they, they look dowdy. Incredible. I mean, if I can put it to you this way, you come over a hill in the TGV, and the line may curve, and you can see the track stretching for 10 kilometers. And then you can see it going up through another embankment, perhaps 10 kilometers away in the distance. And you can tap your neighbor on his shoulder, your fellow passenger on his shoulder, and point to that embankment, but you're going through it already. Like it covers 10 kilometers in seconds. It's really incredible. It's not even plural minutes. It's just incredible. And that's and the TGV is now what 40 years old or something like that. It's for them. It's another day in the office. We haven't even got there yet. So that's the TGV and the bullet train. Other Shall I carry on about Australia? I
Yeah, I
took
was going to ask about Australia and Canada, if you
yeah,
can do a comparison on those
okay,
trips.
Canada first. I was in Canada before I was in Australia, and I took a train from Toronto to Ottawa, and that was kind of comical because it wasn't high tech at all. It didn't have welded rail, and it didn't go fast. I think perhaps 60 miles an hour was the fastest it went. Maybe if we were lucky, perhaps 70 miles an hour. And there was an attendant in my coach serving. He had a little desk at the end of the coach where he had beverages, and I ordered a coffee and I got a coffee, and he was a genial looking African Canadian African, looked like Count Basie actually. and he was very friendly, and it kind of felt like home in a way. It's more colonial, for example, than perhaps France or Japan, or it's far more colonial. But it was not high tech train, not high tech rail. It was a nice experience. It was pretty quick and quite comfortable, but not too quiet. And the permanent way was noisy, although it didn't. There was no pitching and lurching. It was a steady ride. Now we come to Australia. I rode light rail in Perth, and that was light rail. It was very competent and very comparable with our metro rail in Cape Town, but much better track, much better coaches, much better everything. Announcements, everything clean, on time. Just you know, probably about where our current blue and white commuter trains are at now. And announcements were good and everything. But I went on one mainline train from Darnell into Melbourne, and that was pretty sobering because South African, although that was standard gauge, the pitching and the lurching and the rolling, that was a very, very, very uncomfortable, nerve-wracking ride. I mean, the train was going over mounds, and it was more roller coasterish. Just and Chris was riding with me, and he's from there, and he thought it was normal. And I said to him, if I were in South Africa, I wouldn't stand for track like this. And he said, "Well, you would know. You're a rail butt, but to me, it's what I'm used to." So I wasn't impressed by Melbourne's mainline ride. I was impressed by Perth's light rail, but I wasn't impressed by Melbourne, Victoria. And I never rode anywhere else in Australia. They, Australia doesn't have the density of population to, or can we? Yeah, it's population density. It's really just coastal population, and the rest of the place is a large desert. And accountants are very at home in okaying expenditure on trains if trains are going to places with high rise because they know there's enough people to get on that train. But Australia is, apart from the cities, it's not a high rise place. So in other words, your stations in between main towns are all bungalow height. There's no high rise. So they don't have the population density to really support trains like Japan and Europe and England. And I can understand that they went the American way because they like everything American. So their diesel trains are from America. They are General Electric. And they are huge gauge, hugely powerful, long trains. So they've got freight right, but their passenger trains are very so-so. I haven't been on the long distance. There's a couple of long distance expresses in Australia, but they're not known for speed. There's one from Perth to, I think it goes to either Brisbane or Sydney. I can't remember. That's 3 or 4 days on a train. Not fast. It doesn't go at much more than 65, 70 miles an hour, but very comfortable. Sort of like the blue train, that standard of comfort as a sleeper train. But I never went on those. All I can say is that the normal trip from Darnell, which was about 60 miles into Melbourne, didn't impress me at all. And it was normal to Chris, and he's been on trains all over Australia. So I think that Australia is patchy. The experience in Australia is patchy. They've got very good trains there. I just wasn't on them.
So we chatted about France, Japan, Canada, and Australia. Is there any other country that you visited that you caught a train and it was a different experience, or had something special, or there was anything unique about it?
I did go from Brussels to Amsterdam and back, and I also went from Zurich to the Emmental Valley by train, and they were all much the same as English rail, hardly any different. Uh, of course, the Swiss guys, that was just amazing because I was there in about 1993, and they are very far ahead of the other railway lines that I went to in terms of booking. And it needs to be talked about because that's how it should be. I went down to the bus station. I took a walk from my hotel down to the bus station, and I took a bus to the bus station. And then at the bus station, the hotel told me to do this. So at the bus station, I went to a guy and I said, "Where will I get a train to wherever in the Emmental Valley?" And he said, "I'll give you a ticket now." So I said, "But hang on, but this is a bus station." He said, "I will give you a ticket for a bus to the station, and you can get onto the train with that same ticket, and they will put you off at another bus that will put you off at the house. When you get, I think it was Berro that I was going to. And so when you get to Berro, they would you'll be directed by a train attendant to which there's a line of buses, lots of termini. He'll direct you to the right bus, and the driver to the bus will pick up from your ticket exactly where your house is, and he will show you where the house is. And that's exactly what happened. I got on a bus, and it took me to a station, and the bus driver said, "Don't go there, go there," in English. "Go there. That's where that your train won't be in yet." And he checked his watch and said, "It'll be in 18 minutes. Don't take any other trains. Wait 18 minutes before you get on a train." I mean, I was totally looked after. And then on the train, I produced my ticket. I was taken to a seat, put in my seat, told I wasn't allowed to use any other seat. That was my seat, all very precise. And then the guy said to me, "I'll be coming to you before your destination to warn you. There will be announcements, but there are deaf people. There are deaf people, so we come to people, and I will tell you that you're going to be getting off at the next station, and I will tell you where to go for your bus at the next station." And we got to Beira, and he got out the train with me, and he pointed exactly. He said, "Can you see that?" And I verified. I could see it. That's where you get your bus. He got back onto the train, and the train whooshed out, and I hoofed it over to this bus. And the bus driver said to me, "Are you the passenger for whatever street address I was going to?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." He said, "Good. I've been waiting for you. I just wanted to make sure you're early. It's okay. I just want to make sure that I'm ticking off my passengers as they arrive." They seem to know everything. I mean, this is what people are getting right with smartphones today. But the Swiss had that right in 1991 already. It's just amazing. And I did get on the bus from Beroy, and the bus driver did put me off and point out Ildiko's house. It was 50 meters away. He said, "That's the house there. Don't go to any other house. That's the house." And when I pulled up, when I walked to Ildiko's house, I was about to knock on her door, and the door opened, and there was Ildiko. And she said, "Oh, I was expecting you now. The bus comes past every day at the same time as him." I mean, I've never had that in any other system in the world, really, not even Japan. And they're pretty good at that kind of thing.
Can you
So that
describe that scenario for a person traveling to South Africa? How would their experience be with trying to get a door-to-door service?
Okay, well, let's just take, yeah, that's a good question because let's take a cheese producing uh, a town in South Africa. Let's just say instead of going to Emmental in Switzerland, I'm a cheese foodie and I want to go to uh, let's I know, okay, there's a place in the Karoo that produces cheeses called Prince Albert. Now, if a person arrives in Johannesburg and says, I want to go to Prince Albert, I feel sorry for them. I just feel sorry for them. Because if they haven't organized that from their comfortable armchair already in Switzerland or wherever they were, they are in for a hard time. Because there is no such thing. There's no system, there's no timetable, there's no schedule. It's an iterative process. What you will be told is that you could take for example, you'll be told that you could take a Translux or a Intercape bus to Beaufort West, and then get off there, and then you must go to a taxi rank and ask when a taxi goes to Prince Albert, and there may or may not be one that week. There might be three that day. You don't know. Depends. So that's the comparison, you know. And then if you say to a taxi driver, if you ask a taxi driver in Beaufort West, how much is it to Prince Albert? He's going to say 500 Rand, which is not a lot of money in pounds or euros. But if you say, oh, no, 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 I'll find somebody else, he will trim that down to 200 Rand straight away. And if you say, no, 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 that's unrealistic, you know, that's, I know it's X kilometers and that's 2 Rand a kilometer, that's far too expensive. You will get it down to 80 Rand from 500. But tourists generally just say, oh, 500, okay, and they pay the 500 because it's nothing in euros. And that's what you're faced with in South Africa, because that's how people bargain in South Africa. They start at the moon and then they quickly negotiate down to the earth, and then a province, and then a suburb, that sort of scale, you know. So it will come from 500 or 600 down to less than 100. And
So,
people don't.
just for an international audience, you talked about two different types of taxis there, and I think there just needs to be a clarification between a minibus taxi that might go once a week or maybe three times a day, and then a book taxi that you're talking about now, where you can actually bargain with the driver. Because if you try and bargain with a minibus taxi, you're probably not going to get very far.
What I was talking about is a minibus taxi. There will not be such a thing as a taxi from Beaufort West, a car taxi. There won't be an Uber, there won't be a Bolt, there won't be any kind of, you know, 4-seat car. It'll be a minibus, a 16-seater. And you will get places negotiating with that taxi driver because, as I say, he's going to start asking for first class Concorde prices, and he's going to get negotiated down to Morris Minor prices. No, it will be a minibus, and for people from anywhere else in South Africa, there's no schedule. He will never give you a leaving time. All minibuses in South Africa leave only when they're full, and if they don't get full, they don't leave. So there's no system. It's to the European mindset. It's totally haphazard. It actually isn't. Everybody here understands the system, but there isn't any notion of arriving on a plane and being at Prince Albert within 12 hours, which is possible by car if you hire a car. Public transport wise, there's no notion of a system like that. You on your own. You'll have to go from taxi to taxi, asking who's going there. And for example, from ORT, from the airport at Johannesburg, nobody is going to Prince Albert. They'll go part of it, and then they'll tell you, "Oh, I'll take you as far as Bloemfontein," and then you must ask another taxi, and that's how it goes. So you know, there used to be mainline trains that did that, but they no longer exist. Well, there is one train a week apparently from Joburg to Cape Town at the moment. But when I phoned, which was yesterday, they said it's not running at the moment. Can I phone next week? So I said, but your website has just told, website says it's once a week. And the woman was totally open. She said, yes, it says that, but that train is not running this week. Phone next week, and I'll tell you if it's running. So in other words, what actually is happening is that everything is defaulting to being running like a mini taxi, like a minibus. It will run when it's full. It's stupid. And it now takes 33 hours instead of 26 to Cape Town. It's
Okay,
getting,
so we're talking about trains all over the world,
yeah,
and I think next time we can get into what's gone wrong with South African trains and what the future is. But
yeah,
just to finish off this segment, because we're nearly into an hour,
yeah.
um, and I just want to know from you if there's an enthusiast who wants to ride a train somewhere in the world, and they want to know what is the best experience possible, what would your go-to train be in terms of which one is the number one train a person should take that is just the best line, the best train, the best everything?
It depends. Obviously, you get what you pay for. I mean, if they've got 53,000 rand, they can take the blue train from Pretoria to Cape Town, and it'll blow their minds. But we're talking 5,000 euros or something like that, and it's a good 30 hours. But it's incredible luxury, and everything's included. When you get on the blue train, you don't pay for your drinks, you don't pay for anything. Everything is included in the fee. You get on the train and you're cosseted, looked after, stops in Kimberley and you do an excursion to the big hole, that kind of thing. But that's like a luxury tourist experience. If you're just talking the best possible train to go from A to B, you can't really beat a bullet train and a TGV, I don't think. And it doesn't matter where in Europe you take those TGV trains. Spain has got wonderful um, high-speed trains, and the TGV also goes to and from Spain. Italy's got wonderful high-speed trains. Germany, and they all have. They're all comparable, and they're all very comfortable, very fast. I don't. I haven't experienced um, the Paris to London trip, but I believe it's quite impressive. It's about 125 miles per hour, which is 200 kilometers per hour. It's pretty okay. Um, but I've never been on those trains, so but there's nothing to beat looking at the French countryside at 362 kilometers per hour, or looking at Mount Fuji at 360 kilometers per hour. It's amazing, totally amazing. So if you want your mind blown, you have to go high speed rail, high speed train for that.
Okay, that surprises me a little bit because I thought you were going to say the train that runs across Canada for the scenery and for the experience and the luxury. But yeah, I'm wrong on that.
I wanted to go on that train with my brother, but it's costly and slow. It's a 60-mile-an-hour train. It stops a lot. It's also kind of competent. I mean, for an example, you could make phone calls from that train. In the 90s, when I was there, those trains had phones. You could phone home, which, I mean, talking in the days before cell phones. So it was pretty connected. These days, they those trains are all very well supplied with AUXs and USBs and laptops working and Wi-Fi and everything like that. All very well connected, and a lot of entertainment. They have their own streaming entertainment and all that kind of thing. But so do the high speed trains. So does the bullet train and TGV have. I'm not saying they have that as an in-train thing, but it's available on the train. You can do Netflix on the TGV. So that, for the scenery, I would have wanted to do that Rockies trip, but I can't remember the price, but it was way beyond our and my budget, and it was a 3 to 4 day trip, and that's a serious undertaking, 3 to 4 days sleeping on a train, and it hasn't got that great a reputation for timekeeping, and that's why I didn't mention it. But comfortable enough, and wonderful scenery. I mean, they have observation cars with glass domes, and it's wonderful from that point of view. And I don't think you can beat the Rockies for scenery. It's a really scenic trip from that point of view. But as a rail experience, it wouldn't be top of my list. It would be as a scenic experience.
Yeah. So obviously the top of your list, hands down, would be going from Cairo to Cape Town and trying to do that whole entire journey with the railway that's left there, right?
Somebody just did that. I think last year, a guy did that. He did Cape to Cairo on rail, which is actually not possible. It doesn't go all the way. You have to take trips across lakes here and there, and you have to take pumps and things. But he did most of it by rail. And he was asked if he would ever do it again. He said, "Not on your Nelly. No way." It was so expensive in bribes and bonuses and just ridiculous. So, and not safe, not at all safe. He had to buy himself out of trouble a few times. So Cecil Rhodes's dream of Cape to Cairo is a long way off.
Okay, well, that's great. I think that kind of concludes the chat about trains around the world, their differences, your experiences of them. Very insightful. Um, and I think the next time, as I was saying, let's chat about the South African rail, where it started declining, how it started getting quite bad, and where its positive points have been, and what you see as the future. And I think that'll be a quite interesting one to talk about. Unless there's anything more that you want to say about the trips around the world or favorite trains or anything like that
No,
right now.
nothing off the top of my head right now.